everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. Whoa, what the heck? I'm your host, ObjectivelyDan, but who are you?
I'm Jamie Boone.
Jamie Boone?
We've met several times.
It's almost as if we know each other.
We're good buddies.
Jamie Boone, as if you don't know, host of the ACA's own Talk Heathen, and just a local member of the organization. Been doing some cool stuff, and he's on nonprofits as well. I could not forget to include that mention.
Yeah, I mean,
atheists at the nonprofit show is what it is. In case you haven't heard of it, that's another one of our many productions that we do here. And he's joining me today on the last episode of Truth Wanted for 2019. We will be taking a short break here for the holidays. The tentative plan is to come back on January 3rd, so be sure to look out for that. But otherwise, if you're joining us live, this is it for 2019, baby. We're ending it for the year. We've had a...
Oh, I'm here, so we're going to finish strong. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Jamie, always known for finishing strong.
That's
his whole
finishing
thing.
Strong and taking too long. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, so this is Truth Wanted. This is the talk show, call-in show, where we talk about what people believe and why. We were having some interesting discussions actually before the show. I don't know if you want to talk. Oh, we can. We were at Thunderbirds, which is
it's a cafe down the street.
Down the street, and we were talking about the ethics of incest. So that should tell you what kind of conversations we actually have outside the show
I'd emphasize that I am not a practitioner.
No, not a practitioner, but we were interested. Like I don't even know how he brought it up.
I'm also not interested in being a practitioner because you started.
He's studying. He's trying to learn. He wants to get his. There's no shame in that. But
there isn't shame in it. Well, it's just not for me.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I guess when we talk about shame, that's kind of what we were talking about. Is like the ethics of consenting adults.
Yeah, and we didn't get to
the
thing. Yeah, I think the cultural taboo is stronger than the evidence and the reality of it would support.
Yeah, which is something I'm not prepared to talk about or discuss on this show. Really strong opener here, I gotta say.
Yeah, I was gonna say I should save it for and tease that and get secular sexuality to get me on.
Yeah, secular sexuality would be a good show for that. But again, we talk about what people believe and why on this little show here, Truth Wanted. So please call in at the number at the corner there if you're watching this live. Otherwise, you can find this show all over the place. But hey, one of the things I talked about this year was I was hoping we could get to 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year. We're not quite there yet. We just need a couple hundred more. Like, we're really, really close. So if we could do that before the end of the year, that'd be awesome. If not, I'll be happy either way because we've grown so much on this little show here in the past year. And more people are watching, and I'm really looking forward to taking some time to think about what I want to do with the show in the future.
That's true. You've done a very, very modest, very, very normal human pitch for, hey, please actually hit the subscribe button.
Like and subscribe!
In the last month, I met someone who was a big fan, actually, of Jimmy, Mr. Atheist.
Okay, yeah.
Of the Dear Mr. Atheist and Jimmy Snow, What Do You Know? Hey, friend. That said, like, yeah, no, I watch his videos all the time. I see every single one, but I've never hit the subscribe button. I was like, oh, you mean the bell? Like, no, just the button that is subscribe.
Huh.
So that has made me want to say, no, hit that. If you like the thing, your eyes watching it all the time help. But a single click will as well. And your pitch of like, hey, it'd be cool, it'd be nice.
It'd be cool.
Is your tone. But here, let me bring a little bit of spice. So there's two other ways to do this. One is what charities that help starving kids and abandoned puppies and disaster relief do. They go, think of the pain and the suffering and the sadness. Here's a sad song. Look at him.
Just a sad dance.
Look at his sad face. He's so sad.
I didn't reach 10,000 subscribers.
For a couple of subscribers a day, you can ensure that ObjectivelyDan isn't sad
is not
as sad as he could be.
Not as sad.
Right? And then there's the other way, which is I will promise you a thing if we get there. If we get this show, I say we now because I have sat in this chair and now I own the chair. So, whatever, I don't know
That's how property law works.
That's how property works. You claim things with your butt.
Right.
So That's actually about how the early...
Get going. Move on.
Which is, hey, the new year, the calendar-wise, is starting, and that's about when the ACA starts going, you know what, this is a really good time to launch new stuff for productions. We've been working on some production stuff behind the scenes, and I think that you, with your 2 weeks of break, no pressure, if bam, you get to 10,000 subs, because even the people that already sub just share an episode randomly so that other people see it would be great. That some super duper special, awesome, potentially embarrassing, whatever your fans want will happen on this show from Dan.
There's enough embarrassing content with just me on this show. I feel like I don't know whatever else I could offer.
So what you're saying is there could be a compilation video. And or, we could figure out how to do the ringtones we've been always talking about.
Why are we doing this live on air?
Because then you can't say no. That's why.
That's coercive. I don't know how I feel about that.
It is coercive, and it gives them a chance to go, yeah, I would pay $1 million for a thing. Do it.
Let's start I want to do like a rap music video. If you and me. What? Yeah? Yeah? You into it? Here's the thing, folks. If you want to subscribe, I would love it if you could. We also have the show on iTunes, Spotify, and we also have the Patreon. The ACA does look at those metrics and see how the shows are doing and stuff. And we've been doing pretty well this year. I'm really excited to see what 2020 brings for the show, what kind of new guests, new topics, all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I was going to say that. I forgot what I was going to say. You distracted me, to be honest with you. You're very distracting to talk to. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but...
not in exactly those words, but I know what you mean. And when the first part of it, I was going to take as a compliment, and then it sort of sounded like it wasn't.
That's not what I meant. That's not how I meant it, Jamie. Come on.
It's yes. When I speak, people tend to be captivated.
Oh, I was going to say. Okay, now I remember what I was going to say. If as far as giving people, I can give you like smiles. Thoughts and prayers,
Can you give prayers if you don't?
Can I? I mean, I guess I could. It just wouldn't be to anybody. It's just me talking. Does that count?
I mean, that is what prayer is.
Well, there's secular Buddhists that pray.
Do they? I thought they just meditated with beads.
Well, that's kind of like a prayer. I don't know. The point is, I would appreciate if you do. I was thinking though, like my dad. My dad watches YouTube, but he doesn't have a YouTube account and he doesn't subscribe to people. So he's one of those guys where it's like he goes to the channel that he likes, but he has to type them in every time because he doesn't have a subscription feed or anything like that. And it drives me crazy. I'm like, Dad, just get an account. I'll help it out with you. But he's just so used to his old ways, Yeah. Can't change him.
So I'm sympathetic to that because I don't go through... my subscriptions to figure out what I want. Usually, I've gone on YouTube to see a specific thing, and then I go from there.
It's gotten to the point where I'm subscribed to so many things that it doesn't even matter. I'm probably subscribed to at least 100 channels. It's got to be more.
Well, that's why you only bell some.
That's the other thing, too. It's I know so many content creators personally now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. I know you've encountered this. You've gone to conventions where it's oh, have you seen my thing? Be like, no, I haven't. Sorry.
I like talking to you.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Well, there's just so many people making so many good things, and even really close friends of mine, I won't see their stuff right away because I'm just either too busy or just. But you should be watching Truth Wanted live every single week, folks.
Yeah,
that's a requirement of this show. I
was gonna say, don't be like us. Be better than us.
Don't be like us. Be better than us. Anyway, we've got some calls here. It looks
yes,
like. I'm ready to take
do. What do you want to take?
I'm super excited about this one. Already.
Oh, here we go.
And I'm going to go to Laura in Arizona here. Hey, Laura, you're on the air with Truth Wanted. Can you hear us? What's up?
I can indeed hear you.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up is the opposite of down, by the way.
Up is the opposite of down. What?
That's nominatively determined.
Oh, yeah, that's true. It's based on it's the context of orientation. Anyway, Laura, you wanted to talk to us about tulpas. I am so excited to talk about tulpas. For those who aren't aware of what tulpas are, can you give a brief explanation?
Yes, sort of. Oh boy, this.
I'll do it if you don't want to.
This is going to be slightly longer than brief.
Okay, no, I want to hear what you have to say. Go for it.
I was going to say, he has me as a guest on the show. He braced himself for lengthy explanations and chats and rambles.
Indeed.
You got to get what you can take, but... Anyway, tulpas, Laura. What are tulpas for people who don't know?
So, and a huge caveat before I even begin, I've only really been studying tulpas for a couple of months. The first definition that I heard of it was just in passing, like almost 2 years ago now, but I just kind of dismissed it because I had a lot of other things going on at the time. But the very first definition that I'd ever heard of it was an advanced imaginary friend. A lot of tulpamancers, who are people who create tulpas, a lot of tulpamancers take offense to that particular definition.
I imagine.
So we're probably not really going to do anything with that, but just that's the kind of general idea that we're going for.
Yeah. So my understanding of tulpas, right? Yeah, it's the assignment of consciousness to things that otherwise would not be conscious. So there's different ideas. So some of it is like physical objects, but what's really become prominent in recent years from what I've seen is people will basically have, I mean, you know, in colloquial terms, kind of an imaginary friend, right, that actually exists in their head. And depending on who you talk to, the tulpas will either say this is the result of something metaphysical, like they're actually there in some sort of metaphysical sense, or they'll say it's something neurological, like they understand that it's just something that the brain does or whatever. And why, like I've known about tulpas for a long time because a few years ago, I don't know if you remember because it's not as popular now, but like being into My Little Pony as like a guy was a thing. And you would see these posts from people online who were really into My Little Pony that would create tulpas of some of the characters of the show. Like they would actually consciously try to create these little characters in their mind. And there was a study done about tulpas specifically in the My Little Pony community about like who these kinds of people were. I remember they were mostly, you know, suburban white kids, you know, of varying ages, by the way. But I just also remember like they just described kind of a lot of anxiety and a lot of sexual frustration as well, which is an interesting kind of explanation as to why someone would choose to want to do a tulpa, right? It's almost like a coping thing for some people.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It definitely can be.
But if you're listening and you have a tulpa and you want to talk to us about it, I think that's fascinating to talk about. But it's just it's really wild to me that people like would just have the idea of just like, oh, I'm just going to conjure this thing in my head and pretend like I'm talking to it, or I guess to them it's talking to it, you know, and play this out. I know like it's based off of a cultural practice, at least. I think it's an not Indo-European, like an Indian, like
I think I've heard Tibetan monks.
Yeah, something Hindu. I think it comes from that kind of, and I guess some people, you know, on Tumblr just kind of appropriated it, you know, and kind of made it their own little thing.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know, it's fascinating. So, like, what got you interested in tulpas here, Laura? Like, why did you want to bring it up today?
Wait, so can we?
Yeah, no. But,
can we get a little bit of so what I've heard, because this is the first time hearing of it. I mean, technically I heard about this.
Yeah, we should probably go with
2 minutes before the show. So it's imbuing a kind of thought through consciousness to something that doesn't have it objectively. Is it the belief that thing metaphysically has a consciousness?
Well, so that's the thing. It's going to depend on which person you talk to. Okay. Right? Yeah. So some of them will say, yeah, metaphysically they think that being exists. Some of them will just say, yeah, it's just a trick of the brain. Yeah, it's going to be different for different people.
Honestly, at that point, it almost kind of depends on whether you think that people have souls or not. I don't believe people have souls, so I don't think tulpas have souls.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to be straying a little bit away from the spiritual side of things. I haven't done as much research in that because that just didn't really interest me. I am fascinated with psychology in general, so this was just super duper interesting to me.
Yeah, so like what have you found in kind of looking into this, especially since you felt the need to kind of want to bring it up on the show, which I think is great because it's something we definitely haven't talked about before.
Yes. So from what I understand, a tulpa is basically just a psychological phenomenon where, I was trying so hard to remember how to describe this.
It's
and
okay.
Now it's just everything is completely left my mind.
I get
I'm
it.
So sorry.
You get on the call and you just, your brain kind of farts. Like it definitely happens to even people who've been hosting here all the time. So
if you want, there's tulpa.info/whatisatulpa.
There you go.
That is up that I could.
Yeah, I think I actually have that pulled up on my phone.
Is that a good source?
Why don't you start with the first couple sentences there, Jamie?
A tulpa is an entity created in the mind, acting independently of and parallel to your own consciousness. They are able to think and have their own free will, emotions, and memories. In short, a tulpa is like a sentient person living in your head, separate from you. It's currently unproven whether or not tulpas are truly sentient, but in this community, we treat them as such. It takes time for a tulpa to develop a convincing and complex personality. As they grow older, your attention and their life experiences will shape them into a person with their own hopes, dreams, and belief.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would hear that and they would think, oh, is this like a multiple personality disorder? Or something like that.
That thought occurred to
me. And that's definitely probably a possibility for some of this.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced that
the FAQ here actually does have that as one of their general questions is how is this different from DID, MPD, schizophrenia, etc.
Well, those things are also different from each other.
Right. So that's why I'm saying
significantly
could be confused with tulpa.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that that's entirely the case. Surely it's an explanation for some people, but from just what I've read about it, it just seems like an active part of the participant who wants to kind of make this thing happen is making it happen. It's not the result of some sort of neurological disorder.
Yeah, it seems at the very least, developing a tulpamancy is deliberate.
Yeah.
If there's no other difference, that seems.
Because why would I wouldn't I'm not going to have a tulpa of Rainbow Dash from My Little Pony unless I'm a fan of the show and I really like
wanted it, yeah.
Right? It's it's something that you want this kind of character to be real, I think. And then they just,
I mean, You're looking at me. I would say that's probably true, but I don't actually have the answer.
I don't know, but
I was gonna say.
Well, maybe you're actually a tulpa right now, Jamie. You're just
I feel like you're leaning into some some hard solipsism there a little bit. The world is what I imagine it to be. In which case you have an excellent imagination. I think quite a lot of myself.
Well, I think that's an easy way to justify a belief like this because it's like how you can't prove that it's not because it's in my head, and so people can just kind of.
Well, so is it a belief? I mean, you said that some people believe that there's an actual sentient entity.
If we're going with, and I'll let Laura chime in here too, but if we're going with the idea that these are actually sentient beings that kind of live in your head, or maybe they don't necessarily all say that they live in your head. Maybe they think they're outside and they just communicate whatever. That's definitely a belief that not everybody would say is the best explanation for what's going on there, right?
Yeah, that's not the explanation that I would proffer.
No, I wouldn't do it. But anyway, I want to let Laura chime in here because I think she has something to say.
Yes. So one thing goodness, I could go off on so many rabbit trails. So what I personally believe is that it is a psychological phenomenon, but they are actually like separate individual people that can all just sort of use the same brain, so to speak, as the way that they do things. Like humans don't really use 100% of their brain all the time. I mean, we'll use different parts for doing different things, but like a tulpa could easily live in one of those pieces of the brain that's not being used by you consciously at the moment.
So, so the way that you're characterizing the amount of a human's brain that we use, I think is not necessarily the best way of representing that, because there's the humans only use 10% of their brain stuff, and that
that's also another huge thing that I probably shouldn't have even brought up.
Well, because it's not true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh dear.
I mean, it's not true. It's not true in the way that it sounds. It's 10% of the brain matter that you use performs a specific function directly related.
I don't think that's what she was saying.
No, I know. I meant to.
What I was meaning.
I meant to say that just as an aside. But the question that I would want to ask is, when you say it's like multiple people using the same brain, the people that weren't born in that brain, we'll say, the tulpas, do you think that their origins are from outside that brain, or is their creation from the brain?
Personally, personally, I believe that their creation is from that brain, just because I don't think that there is anything outside of the brain that would, like, the whole soul thing. I don't believe in souls.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Because it sounds like your idea of what makes a person is their particular brain function.
Yeah. And so this would just be
identity.
two individual people that just happen to be using the same brain.
See, I don't know if it's even two individual people. I think it's like there's the one person and then there's the extra personality that first person creates. You know what I mean? I think if it's something...
No, not necessarily.
Because I don't think...
that is definitely one way to look at it, that's for sure.
Because I don't think people are role-playing necessarily as their tulpas or believe that they are their tulpas.
No.
They think that the tulpas are...
That is a different thing entirely.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So is it possible for the tulpa to know or think something that is there a word for, host brain personality?
We'll just call it host and tulpa for now.
Okay. Is it possible for the tulpa to know and think something that the host is unaware of?
See, yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I think the tulpomancer would say yes. Right? I think what we would say...
I certainly would.
Yeah, wait, sorry, are you a tulpa mancer?
No.
I almost said tulpa master. Have you mastered the tulpas?
I would consider myself one, yes. I've only really had my tulpa for a couple of months, so he's still pretty young, still becoming himself, but he is there, and I have felt things from him. So that's a thing. We'll talk more about him later, though.
Man, okay, wait, I want to talk about your tulpa now. Who is your tulpa?
Okay.
Bring it on out.
My tulpa is named Russell. You know Mew from Pokemon?
Mm-hmm.
He kind of looks like that, except not quite so chibi.
All right.
And red.
I'm into it. So, I like Pokemon. Pokemon are cool.
Hey. What shade of red is your tulpa?
What shade of red is your tulpa? So like was Russell a thing before you even started looking into tulpas, or like how did Russell come about?
So, like I said, like almost 2 years ago now is the first time I ever heard about tulpas at all. I didn't even know what the word was. Until a couple of months ago, I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to research this. I'm going to figure out what this thing is, because it sounds interesting, and I actually have some time right now. So I did some research for a couple of days, and then was just sitting on my couch doing more research. And I was like, you know what, I want to do this. This sounds awesome. And so I did a little bit of more research of how to make a tulpa, and then Russell just sort of appeared. He didn't have a name at the time, but I was able to mentally picture him in the room with me.
Wow. Okay.
Which was interesting.
I have so many questions, but first I do want to point out for those who are listening, because you won't get this if you're just listening to the podcast feed. Our folks did change our background here to say subscribers wanted instead of truth wanted, which very good, Vern. I appreciate that. I'm assuming that's you that did that, so appreciate you.
Yeah.
Okay. So wow. So when you pictured him. Were you actively trying to picture a thing, or would you say this idea just kind of came to you, like this image just appeared? Like, were you?
I'm a super creative person in general. I love creating characters and worlds and stories and like figuring out the rules of the world to know how far I can bend them before they break. So coming up with characters and personalities for them is really, really easy for me. So he just kind of appeared. As soon as I made the conscious decision, I want to do this, then he just sort of appeared. And I wanted him to, because I read that they were supposed to be like their own person, I wanted him to be able to be his own person and not just be whatever the heck it is I wanted him to be.
How long did you say you were doing this research before the creation of Russell, or before birth? Is it birth?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, you can call it a birth if you want. I generally consider it a creation at that point.
Okay. So how much time before the creation of Russell had you been researching tulpas?
Only a couple of days at that point, to be honest.
Okay. And just a couple of hours on those days, or?
Yeah.
You're trying to catch metrics on the specifics.
No, I actually had. Sorry.
I'm just trying to establish, like, because there's a lot of things that prime, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of this as a psychological phenomena, and you're describing the behavior of a tulpa, and I'm wondering whether a tulpa just showing up rather than you imagining it is consistent with the research that you found.
So, like, the stuff you were looking at before priming the tulpa,
can show up. There are a couple of ways that tulpas can show up, to be honest.
I believe it.
However, this is not the end of the story, though. So I did that, and then I decided to go on YouTube and look at some of those hypnosis videos, because there are some that are like specifically primed for like creating a tulpa or like connecting with one or whatever. So I did one of those, and I had a really interesting experience where I realized that the personality that I had given Russell to begin with wasn't actually who he was and wasn't who he wanted to be. It was mildly traumatic, and it made me realize that I was...
So this is what's
properly
scary to me.
That's fascinating to me. Did the tulpa act with the personality that you had given the tulpa?
Yeah.
Okay, I should probably back up a little bit. So when I first created him, he was a lot more energetic and flirty.
Ooh.
And I know, right?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, well, my lonely nights are over. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, that could go off on another rabbit trail, man.
No. Keep telling your story.
Sorry.
That show's on Thursday nights.
Jesus.
So he was very flirty, very teasing in the way that he would interact with me. But I realized later that I was controlling everything that he said and did. And when I did the hypnosis thing, I realized that I was the one controlling him. I was the one doing that. And that he didn't like that.
Okay, so to clarify, you watched the hypnosis after Russell had already been created?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just getting the timeline here.
So
sorry.
You're
good.
And then, okay, so Russell kind of fought back, or at least your idea of Russell as a conscious being was, kind of taken aback by what you're doing.
If this will help, there was something like what we were doing. Like there's this, you can see this thread between yourself, between your chest and your tulpa's chest, or something like that. And what I saw that
wait, sorry, your chest and the
different.
Your chest and the tulpa's chest?
The tulpa's chest.
What do you mean?
So Russell's chest and my chest.
Does Russell's chest exist in physical space?
You see it?
This was in hypnosis, by the way.
Okay.
So we were currently in like some kind of a forest glade grove thing.
Oh.
In your mind?
Grass and then surrounded by trees. Yeah, in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, like that scene from Twilight. Sorry.
Stop it with your witty banter. You're making her nervous, and she's getting distracted. Let her tell her story.
I'm a very distractible person.
Sorry.
I'm a very distractible person. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Right. So, Russell. So we were in this forest, and the hypnosis person, I can't remember who it was, said, like, there's a thread between your chest and your tulpa's chest. And then he kind of went off on his own little tangent. He grabbed the thread, he broke it, and he ran away. And I freaked out a little bit until I realized, he's actually doing this himself. It's not me doing this, because I kept trying to, like, regain control of his body to bring him back. And I was like, that's probably what he doesn't want, is me controlling his body.
Huh. Well.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, so that's so I was going to say this earlier, but what's scary to me is the idea that, like, you can invite a conscious being into your brain space. Like, you want to try it? I'd be like, no. Like, I like my brain where it is. I don't want to share. You know what I mean? But I guess different strokes for different folks. But, like, I don't, like, so we obviously know that the brain can do things unconsciously, without like our consent, like dreams and stuff. Like, that's mostly without conscious thought. There's some people that say they can lucid dream and stuff like that. So like, what,
which is awesome, but I've never been able to do it.
Are we sure that this isn't? Oh, okay. That's.
Have you tried
lucid dreaming? I haven't really tried too terribly hard.
Okay.
I think everyone's mildly tried before. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, no, because she heard about tulpas and then did research about it. And so I was wondering whether she had attempted lucid dreaming and that was a psychological phenomenon that despite the same amount of research hadn't occurred, but that wasn't the case.
I'll put this caveat out there as well, though. Until about a year-ish ago, I was a Mormon, so that kind of had a mental block. Now that I'm an ex-Mormon, I don't have that mental block for this stuff anymore, which is part of why I actually wanted to try it first.
Yeah, you get to be more open-minded.
Honestly, one of the first psychological phenomenon I've actually tried.
I'm with you on that. Now, as far as what you think this psychological phenomenon is for yourself, do you ascribe this as something that's completely explained through neurology, or do you think there is a separate sentience involved, or like what's your explanation to the existence of Russell?
I think that it is a psychological phenomenon, that it's still just my brain doing brain things. I'm just trying to convince it that there is another sentient person besides myself using my brain.
Yeah, okay.
So
it's not an outside force at all.
Yeah.
At least not to me anyway.
Okay, yeah.
The way you've just described it is, I'm trying to convince myself that there's a conscious brain inside of it. So does that mean that there's an element of doubt here about Russell's existence?
Well, I mean, there's no way to know for sure that he actually is there. I have my personal experiences, but I can't, scientifically show that he's there.
Well,
so there's always that, non-zero chance that he's not there. And that it's just my brain being my brain.
I mean, yeah. So now I have a second question, because it sounded like that's what you were saying you believe to be the case. Is that currently the conclusion that you hold?
Yes. Okay. It is currently the conclusion that he is actually there and that this is a psychological phenomenon that we just don't understand very well yet.
What do you think of, but most people in the Tulpa community, I mean, obviously you would probably be in a newer camp in that, I don't keep my ears to the ground in this. Like, are most people in the Tulpa community, are they thinking that this is, I guess most of them would say that it actually is a sentient being that exists outside themselves, be it, metaphysical or neurological or whatever.
Sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Which also brings me to the thought of Wonderlands, because the way you keep describing it keeps making me think of Wonderlands, and that's another rabbit hole that we probably shouldn't go down.
Probably not. We do have to. I do want to give some time to some other callers here in just a sec here, but if for people who want to at least know more about the Tulpa stuff, what was it that you were looking at so that people can kind of poke their heads into it? Because I think it's interesting just to look at, right?
This won't be the last time I learn.
I'm going to put you in speaker again for a second. Yes, tulpa.info has a lot of really good information, as well as what I mostly went to. So I got you off speakerphone now. Where I got most of my information from was actually from Reddit.
Of course.
There's actually two subreddits for tulpas. One is just tulpa with an A at the end. The other is tulpas with an S at the end.
Nice.
The tulpas with an S at the end is way more active. So go there.
There you go.
If you have any questions about tulpas.
So now if you want to know more about tulpas, because now I might look up some more stuff later. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah, they're fun.
It's interesting to see how people explain and describe what's happening in their brains. But anyway, Laura, I want to give you
one thing I did want to get to though before I go
very quickly
was how the host and the tulpa communicate.
Okay.
Because that's always a little bit different. And I don't think I've ever really heard anyone describe the way that me and Russell have communicated. I almost forgot. I haven't even finished Russell's story. Oh my gosh, I got completely distracted.
Okay, let's try to wrap it up in the next couple minutes here, and then yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll try to be fast. Don't distract me, Jamie. Okay, so the thing happened with the hypnosis where I realized that he didn't want to be controlled. Then things started happening in real life, and I kind of put him on the back burner with something called passive forcing, Whoever wants to look up information about tulpas, they can look up what passive forcing is. I don't feel like giving a definition. So just kind of imagining that he is there with me and trying very hard to not control what he does so that he can do his own thing and be his own person. In the last couple of months, like in the last month or two-ish, I think, I've actually been able to have some very simple conversations with him, though. Most of it is where I will be like asking him a question, but he will answer before I've actually finished the question. And that's how I know that it's him answering and not me, is because we'll kind of be talking over each other.
Okay.
In my head. As well as, oh, right, I totally forgot. This is a thing that I wanted to get to as well.
All right. 45 more seconds here, Laura. 45 seconds. Can we do it?
So bringing up the idea that Jesus, God, whoever it is that people pray to, that is also an accidental tulpa, where they really do think that they are talking to a real person and that person will talk back. That is very, very similar to how tulpas are created by tulpamancers.
Man, there's definitely some
very, very similar.
I'm hesitant to explore that angle, but there's definitely some similarities there.
I was going to say that absolutely can be explored in the last 15 seconds.
A different version of the phenomenon there, but I feel like it is somewhere in the same general vicinity as that.
So what's interesting,
at any rate,
is that there's a relatively famous among, I suppose, YouTube activists that have an interest in neuroscience study about testing like the moral beliefs of a person's God, right? And they asked the person, what do you believe about X, Y, Z? And they studied an fMRI of what was going on in their brain. And they said, what do other people believe about X, Y, and Z? And they did that. And then they asked, what does God believe about X, Y, and Z? And the firings on the fMRI when they were answering what God believes were similar, if not the same, as when they were describing themselves.
How they felt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then when describing like what somebody else thought, it was a completely different set of neurons firing.
Yeah. Yes, I have heard of that as well. Because why would you not have the same morals as your God? You know, if you truly believe.
It's very difficult to say. Yes, the perfect judge of the universe believes X, but I kind of disagree.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, so we do got to go. We got other callers here, but Laura, thanks so much for calling.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you about tulpa stuff some more.
I had a lot of fun, even though I was so nervous.
Hey, you did great.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for sharing your experiences. I look forward to hearing from you again. And take care.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a Discord and a Reddit and a Discord. I already said, but there is a thing on a thing, so I might have said it, where the conversation can continue in between.
That's true. We do have the Atheist Community of Austin Discord where people can also check us out. And you should join us after the show as well.
On Discord. Link in the chat.
But yeah, no, so so much to say. I got other calls. But like, I mean, it's
interesting.
Isn't it cool? Because this community, I feel like, can really only exist as big as it is because of the internet, right? When people do this kind of
the tulpas, you mean?
Well, I mean, obviously tulpas have existed before the internet, right? But like,
well, you say that
for us to even have a conversation is because of the internet, the dissemination of that
it's
kind of
true.
Right?
Yeah, but it's also possible that tulpas or any practice that resembles this hasn't been. Well, I guess this is supposedly from a meditative practice of monks in Tibet.
Yeah, or something like that.
Why is it all the meditate?
They came up with a lot of crazy shit. Also, hypnosis is crazy, and we haven't talked about that enough. I've seen people get hypnotized.
Yeah.
And that's a really weird thing. But we got to move on. I want to go to the next caller here in Ransom. This is calling from Bakersfield, California. Hey, Ransom, you're on the air.
Good evening. How are you guys doing today? My first question, Jamie, are you screwing with me? How long ago did you put that shirt on? I promise there's no sexual context behind it.
I mean,
this shirt?
Yes.
I was actually wearing a different shirt at work today. I wore this shirt 2 days ago on a stream in the after party on Neil 604
since you put it on. Just now, since you put it on.
Do you think he changed shirts while we were doing the show?
I think I'm actually hoping he didn't, because in the live stream right before you guys got started up, there was mention of you looking like Al Borland when you're animated, and then you show up with a flannel shirt looking like Richard Karn.
Oh, well, that's so I send so we have an artist that does those pictures for me. You should definitely check it out. She's on Instagram at PrinceEpEd. Yes, Epsed, AEPSED. Anyway, and I send a picture to them to get a headshot from it, and they make those. So they don't always match up to what the person happens to be wearing that day. You know, she just.
No, he wasn't wearing flannel in the shirt, in the animation.
Wearing a suit.
He was wearing.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like I said, we send those to an artist, and they get that done separately.
Also, I don't know either of the names that you said, so I'm assuming.
Have you seen Home Improvement?
Oh, you know what? The last time I wore this shirt, someone said something about looking like the guy from Home Improvement.
You're like Tim Allen.
Well.
You're also like Haley Joel Osment, as we discovered today. But that's another thing.
Yeah, I think I've seen a picture of that guy before.
But Ransom, what did you really want to talk to us about today?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually that did kind of tie into it, just because of what you would call coincidence. Well, I don't know what to call it right now.
The word coincidence will work. No.
Well, yeah, but I see patterns more hyperactively than most people do, and it I don't know whether or not to believe in a God.
Okay.
I'm on the fence right now, and when I don't believe, it leads me toward belief. When I'm starting to go toward belief, I get led toward not belief, and I'm mixed up.
Yeah.
So how do you go about when you go through these, reflecting on whether or not you think there's a good reason to believe in a God? Can you talk us through generally how your thought process goes?
Well, talk to the people who disagree with me.
That's good. Sounds like you talk to a lot of smart, persuasive people then.
I listen to a lot of smart, persuasive people.
Hi.
So, Ransom, a bit of context about my background. I was a Christian for a number of years, and, I did the same thing. I just kind of hunkered down, and I just listened to people that thought differently from me for a little while. And I just kind of closed my mouth and just, tried to cede my objections and just let people talk and talk about, one, their experiences, but also, two, the reasons why they had this disbelief. Because for a lot of people, they start out believing and then they don't. Some people, obviously they don't live their whole lives, but the majority of people, at least in this community, I've found were believers at one point and then they didn't, because they listened to other people who didn't believe. And so, we could talk about the different reasons all day, but what specifically... obviously, like Jamie and I have conclusions, right? Like there's Jamie Joel Osment over there in the back. I like it for those who are watching live. It's pretty good. So, we could talk about the different reasons and stuff all day, but, I don't think that's going to matter unless we talk about what is keeping you in belief specifically, and what is hesitating, what is stopping you from calling yourself one way or the other? Like, why can't you call yourself an atheist today? Like, what's holding you back?
Well, I believe, based on likelihood, that there is existence outside of the universe. I have no reason to believe it's a God, because for all I know, it could be some jackass on Twitch that's been running me around nowhere for the last 30 years.
Yeah. So, the question of atheism really is just accounting for God or not, right? So if you say you don't believe there's gods or any gods, then you're good. That means you're an atheist. You can believe that there's outside forces or whatever, but if we're just talking about gods, then yeah, that's it.
Well, what's the difference between a force that can act on whim upon the universe and a God?
Well, so historically, people have different conceptions of God. Generally, God is a personality of some kind, with different kinds of attributes that we could relate to personhood. If we're just talking about general forces, yes, they can be powerful, but that's also in the context of human beings, right? We just recognize what's stronger, what's weaker, based on our experiences and stuff. So I wouldn't have a reason to call gravity a god, for example, because I don't attribute any personhood to it or any kind of specific attributes that define it outside of the context of a natural force.
Well, I'm not going to plug myself in any way. Oh, go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, basically what Dan touched on with the difference is agency. If you meant like an active thinking, decision-making, opinion-having, I was about to say brain force, agent, as it were, that can act on the universe, then that's close to some definitions that people have used for God. Usually in the modern era, it's the classical, all-powerful, I know everything God, but,
Right, but just in context of likelihood, I write fiction. I'm not going to plug myself, but I write fiction, and I know that I can create a universe that I can control on whim. I am a god relative to that universe within my mind.
Yeah, but that's not really what people mean when we talk about atheism and theism, though, right?
Do you know what repeating fractals are?
Yes.
Okay, so when we get into repeating fractals and we see things like frame tales, like the Canterbury Tales, what we see is that we can have a story within a story within a story.
Yeah.
And based on likelihood, we have no stories that don't exist within a story, which leads me to believe.
I'm sorry, hold on. When you say we don't have stories that exist outside of another story, what you're describing is an infinite regress of stories that exist for all stories. Once upon a time, there was a sentient traffic cone, and he was sad because he got stuck on this table and went nowhere else. And that was the end of his conscious life. I believe that the story I've just told you does not exist inside another story. Am I understanding what you're talking about within a story correctly?
At that point, we need evidence that we are not one of the stories existing of another mind.
So hold on, because part of what you said, at least implied to me, that you're asserting that it is true that this is a story. Is that a belief that you hold?
I find it more likely than not. I can't assert it, no, but I find it more likely than not.
What persuades you of that?
What?
Why do you find that likely?
Because every universe that we know of was created of conscious mind.
Okay.
Well,
hold on.
Wait.
So
I don't know.
We know of one, and as far as I'm aware,
there isn't. Well, I think he means he's talking about fictional universes like Game of Thrones or like.
Is
Harry
that what
Potter,
you mean,
right?
Or do you mean this one?
Well, the universe, we tend to explain things in terms of other things we understand, correct?
Yeah, it's the only way to.
So the only universes that we know of that we can explain the origins to are universes that are of digital origin or of psychological, mental origin.
Yeah, so I disagree, because what you've just described, as you've said, we don't know about this universe, but you think it's likely.
Here's what I would say.
This universe is different than the books we read.
Here's what I would say. I think this is a conflation of the terms universe.
Yes.
Because when we're talking about universe, we're talking about natural forces containing everything that we know to exist. Whereas I think you're also including like the stories that people write and like the narratives that people construct. To, whether it be to explain something or just for fiction or fun. I wouldn't say that those two are the same things, right? Like if we're talking about the universe as physics, that's got to be separate from the universes that we create as storytellers, don't you think?
Well, if we don't have a form of a universe that doesn't exist outside of a conscious mind, then it is more likely than not that our universe is of conscious
But don't you think
mind.
our universe, like the one that we both inhabit, exists outside of our conscious mind?
Outside of ours, yes.
Yeah.
But outside of any conscious mind, I don't know.
So let me ask this question. When a person creates, for example, Game of Thrones, this is a type of universe that you're describing. It's a story, right? Do you believe that the characters in that story and the matter, well, here, that's a magic universe, a story about normal stuff happening on Earth. Do you think that that particular story has mass and fundamental forces and atoms and biology and things on the microscopic level that are not at all described within it?
To get magic out of the scenario, let's use Grand Theft Auto as an example.
Sure. Okay. Grand Theft Auto. Do you believe that that universe, I'm going to put it in quotes because we're using one word in two ways in order to avoid inadvertent equivocation. Do you think that that universe exists, for example, outside of a game console?
No, I don't.
Okay. So is your proposal of, well, this universe seems like it would be a narrative, I mean, not a game console specifically, but that's the type of thing you're thinking about, like, this is a video game.
Well, we are mostly empty space.
I mean, okay.
There is so much room between a proton and an electron.
Is the same true of protons and electrons in Grand Theft Auto?
Basically, it's pixelation that we see a very minute piece of, and inside of the coding is a completely different situation.
So that's my problem. Hold on, because your overarching theme is that this universe is like the other ones, but on a fundamental level, when we go there, you say, well, at a fundamental level, it's different.
No. What I'm saying is that the code is different than what we see on the screen.
Sure.
And the code is mostly empty space inside of a hard drive where we see full solid matter.
No.
When we look at, let me chime in.
Yeah, please.
When I look at Mario, if I'm looking at like an 8-bit Mario, it's actually just squares that I'm just attributing like agency and like personality to, right? Like that's all human built stuff. It's, like this is all happening in my head when I'm looking at Mario and thinking, oh, he's a plumber from Italy. That's not actually being displayed on the screen. That's the cultural context of which I've understood the pictures on the screen to represent, right? Like that's not the same thing as saying, this is a thing that exists inside this universe. Like I think we're going a little too far in saying that this is like a separate universe in itself. And I think it's a term that can be confusing for people, but really it's just, again, it's a cultural context that we're understanding when we're looking at these things, right?
Well, Michio Kaku says that we are based on small vibrating extra-dimensional strings.
Yeah.
And quantum gravity research says that we are created out of Planck tetrahedrons.
So that doesn't make Super Mario Brothers real, though. Like, yeah. I don't know how else to say it, right? It's like
so. What you've talked about is a lot of
Mario's not real.
Okay, so now I'm confused because you've said that there are stories. These stories exist within stories. This universe that we exist in is a story like those, and this presumably the universe we live in is at least real for us, right?
It's real relative to us, but I don't know if it's objectively real.
When you say objectively real, what do you mean?
In the same sense that random number generators can create a decision in, for the sake of dialogue, we'll go with Oblivion for this part, because Oblivion had that random number generator dialogue that would impersonate free will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how are we to know if we have any free will or if we're just acting on random numbers?
That's a great question, but it has nothing to do with the God thing, right? Because when we first started, we were asking whether or not you would describe yourself as an atheist and a theist, and we were talking about what are the arguments for and against the existence of a God, and I'm kind of more interested in exploring that. Right, because whether free will or not exists, there could still be a God or not, right? So like I'd like to go back to that if we could.
Yeah. Also, it seems like your answer didn't address at least what I was trying to get at, which was things about objective reality, because your answer was about consciousness and free will, which is different.
It all seems to tie in together for me. If we are acting,
that's the impression I'm getting. Yeah.
It's basically that secular Buddhism where I want to be one with everything, and I can't.
You kind of are.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know where that everything ends. I don't know.
Who says it
where
does?
the.
Whoa. That's Jamie's just pulling out.
Barbadurkle. Somebody's going to get laid in college.
Did you just pull out a cone? Like a Buddhist cone out of your ass right now? I mean, what's going on?
That's not how I would have described the conversation just now. But
Barbadurkle, did you just quote my favorite show?
Eek Barbadurkle, yes, I did.
Oh
have you seen the new season? Okay,
get out of here. Anyway,
right.
so
sorry, but back to the God thing, which is what Dan wanted to get to.
It sounds like you don't have a God belief, right? So to answer your question, you're an atheist, at least by our definition of what atheist means.
The expansive definition, yeah.
Yeah. So,
because even if it's all powerful relative to this universe, it could be borderline useless in its own universe, in its own plane. Because I do think that the E8 lattice and the 8th dimensional universe is a thing. And I think the multiverse exists within it. And kind of like I said at the beginning of this, it could be all powerful here. It could be a friggin' dishwasher in its own plane of existence.
Maybe, but unless it has agency, then I wouldn't call it a God.
Also, we don't know that there is an it or that there is a universe in the scientific sense outside of this one.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, I do want to get to the other callers here.
Yeah.
We did spend a bit of time on this, but
the last thing. Oh.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Ransom, I appreciate you calling. I hope that we at least answered something for you.
Damn.
As you were calling in. But if you want to discuss this more, I'm willing to talk about, multiple universes and string theory and all kinds of stuff, but it's hard to talk about all of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So maybe next time we can explore it a bit more. Sound good?
Yeah.
I understand completely. It's getting easier for me to grasp it. And I've already decided humanism first.
Hell yeah.
Whether or not gods exist is irrelevant.
Yeah. So
I'm into it. So
everything else is window dressing.
That's right. So Ransom, keep on trucking, and I will talk to you next time you call.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I hope he does call in again or goes on the Discord or the Reddit, or he just shows up at someone's house and knocks on the door and we chat then. But it seems like a lot of where it was going, I guess the call's over, but was from a kind of rationalist approach to understanding the universe, which is what one can understand rationally. But I am a bigger fan of empiricism because it depends on things that are objective, right? His description of universes as narratives, from my perspective, exist in a mind, and he seems to be putting together. I don't know.
Our constructs within our universe.
Yeah, I would say
right?
This makes me want to reread Kant's critique of pure reason.
When you read, you don't create a separate universe when you're talking about Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, right? It's still.
I would say not in the same way that this.
Exists. It's still a part of it's still part of the physics that make up our universe. Even the cognitive aspects of thinking about a fictional universe are still part of our universe. You know what I mean? So like you saying that this is a separate universe, like that's just, it's a conflation of terms, and people who are really trying to grift you will conflate these terms to try to convince you of, you know, all kinds of bullshit that's not real. So it's just something to look out for when you're like experimenting with these kinds of thoughts. Because the first time when you're thinking about this stuff, it's kind of wild. And it's hard to put it all into groups and terms. And here we are saying, hey, like we kind of thought about this. Here's how we do it. Maybe there's other people who think differently. But until we talk about that again, I do want to go to another caller here. I want to go to Stan in Pennsylvania. Hey, Stan, you are on the air with Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, how are you?
Doing just fine. Been talking about tulpas and string theory. Well, so kind of cool.
Narrative universes.
This has been an interesting night. Before I say anything else, though, I wanted to say hi to Jamie.
Hey.
I think you're great.
Oh,
I've loved your work on Talk Heathen, and I really love your perspective, and I wish we could see more of you these days.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll start taking off clothes.
That was funny. Wow.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. What did you want to talk about on the show?
Okay, so I had only just thought of this because I was watching a different show on YouTube earlier, and a topic came up about like the Confederate flag, and those who think of it as just like a symbol, a cultural symbol, right? Yes. And then others who look at it as a symbol of hate. I had so the host of the show that I was watching, they had a disagreement about like how this should be handled. One host said that like it would be interesting to see like a conversation in which you brought on people who were in support of the flag, right, and then others who thought it was offensive, and just talk it out, and maybe if you showed the people who are in favor of the flag that like this Confederate flag is offensive for these reasons, maybe we could see progress, find out exactly why they support it and all that stuff, right? But then another host disagreed with that, and they were saying how we do too much coddling of racists, and how like doing something like that would just give them a platform to spread their ideas, and that like our society in general has been centered around white supremacy, and that like there's plenty of opportunities for them to learn, and that it shouldn't be our job to be educating, which I agree on that part. It shouldn't be our job to educate white people about racism and bigotry in general. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I sort of, it's not for everyone, but I would sort of, there's a part of my brain that goes, no, if you want something done right, do it yourself. In terms of trying to educate and have productive conversations with a person whose mind you wish to change, or at very least whose perspective you want to inform, right? This idea of, well, it's not our job. Sure, I don't see it necessarily as anyone being morally or ethically or socially obligated to have these discussions, et cetera, but that's very different than saying one shouldn't do that, right? Like, I'm not going to compel and tell someone, oh, well, you want to be active and encountering racism or ideas of white supremacy, but you don't want to talk to white supremacists. Shame upon you. No, there's many ways to go about this. The question of whether or not, for example, if I talked to a neo-Nazi or whatever, recorded that interview and posted it. Not something that I plan on doing, but I need a hypothetical to talk about. So a person that would say, you are wrong to do that, can't say, I'm not obligated to, can't say that they are not obligated to do the same as an argument. In terms of having conversations and attempting to inform discourse and public debate, not everyone does it the same way, is what I would say. Certainly there's wrong ways to go about that. Handing a microphone and a huge stage and 2 hours of a giant audience to the reincarnated corpse of Hitler or whatever is very different than, trolling people on whatever it is, Discord, and there's a million things in between there. So I'm sort of wondering if you draw the line somewhere, or if you've thought specifically what your position on this is.
So, Stan, I'm assuming the reason why you're calling is because you want us to talk about like the utility of talking to, bigots or people who might disagree with what we have to say, right? Like, you kind of want our take on it.
Yes. So I was just explaining the situation because I saw it from both ends. I thought they both had really valid points. But I'm leaning towards what you're saying, Jamie. I'm Black, and the idea. I really liked the one host when she said that so many times Black experiences and people of color aren't centered in these conversations, right? It's the experience of white people and how they view race, right? And it's us kind of like just trying to convince them on the edges, hold their hands, like, okay, like this is wrong for this and this and reasons, like these beliefs are bad for this and that reason, and like leading them, to the promised land, rather than talking about the experiences of people who are bigoted. And also, this also, works for homophobia as well,
Yeah.
I think a lot of those same dynamics are there on that end. So I could see it from her end, but I lean more to what you're saying, Jamie, and that at least for those who are prepared to do so, right? Because this is an emotionally taxing activity, right? Is that like I think we have to engage people. I think if we don't, I think there are those who can't be convinced, right? Clearly, right? They're hard. Their beliefs have been calcified, and we can't do anything about that, right? But there's a spectrum, and I think there are people on the edges who we can get to, but they've never heard these perspectives. Like what we think is obvious, like obvious information and easily accessible information about like the truth about the different races and their intelligences or something like that, or just that gay people aren't, raging pedophiles or something, or whatever they happen to believe, like that seems obvious to us, but for others, they've never heard it,
Yes. So I would say, Stan, this issue, what you're talking about, the utility of talking about these things, probably one of the most important issues of the 21st century that we know of so far.
Yeah.
I would say in terms of our politics, at least right now, in terms of
in America, at least.
Because what we have now in the information age is everybody has a platform.
Yep.
Everybody has a platform.
Even your Aunt Sue.
People's ideas can go anywhere, all over the place. Why are we seeing less people vaccinate their kids? Because the idea of anti-vaccination has spread to the point where it hadn't before in ways that we previously had not calculated. And this is because of
the barrier to mass information has been utterly destroyed and removed. It used to be that you had to be incredibly well connected and very, very rich, at least in America, to influence public opinion. And that's why the newspaper magnates basically...
it's not just 3 news organizations that are on your TV now. We've got multiple sources, and even with the monopolization of a lot of that, we're still coming up with independent sources who are giving their own perspectives and their own things. So it's like, like what do we do? How do we, if we want to be good, ethical people, how do we need to approach this subject when we talk about issues that can cause serious consequences for the human rights and just the harm of people in general? And I'm not someone who's going to pretend like they have all the answers, but
I would say there's also a difference between talking to someone and making sure that there's a productive conversation. Because there's people that will say there are no productive conversations with a bigot, and that may be true for that's almost certainly true for certain individuals. And I will agree with those people that there are definitely unproductive conversations where voices are amplified.
Yeah, so like I'll say so this is a show where I like to talk about all kinds of people's ideas and stuff. But like so Jamie is gay. Let's say surprise. In case you didn't know. If we were to have a conversation with somebody right now whose threats to Jamie, whose beliefs, like
if Tommy McMurtry called in,
if Tommy McMurtry called in, or like if somebody called in and their voice was so powerful or influential enough to where that could cause harm to Jamie's life, whether it be people harassing him online, harassing him in real life, or whatever, like that's not a conversation I want to have with anybody, because that's I want to protect that. But if plus McMurtry, in particular, if we're naming specifics, there's bad actors. There's always going to be bad actors, and how we suss out who's a bad actor and who's not, that's a complicated process in itself too. But
I'd say,
I was just saying, if someone is willing to have who is previously, because I held beliefs that one would call bigoted about gay people at one point in my life. And I have changed, but I did not get the change until I was open to other people's perspectives. And how could I be open to other people's perspectives until I've heard the experiences of other people?
Yeah.
And like, you have to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Like at some point you do. You can't just ignore it because people are going to get it from other places if you don't talk to them. So,
it's true. There's 2 points on there that I'd like to just piggyback on quickly, which, many people won't believe that I can do, but here we go.
Yeah.
One is sort of, yes, civil discourse requires a civil format, a civil stage, or public square, if you will, and a civil society. And attempting to have a civil discourse or a civil conversation when people are chanting and protesting, that particular moment is not the best.
Nope.
Because human beings are
People
emotional,
get riled up.
et cetera. And then also, if you're thinking about, I want to affect the way that other people think, and you're thinking about, okay, how are those people going to change their minds? I don't think it's helped by saying, well, I will not inform them of my opinion. They will go to the people that are willing to talk to them, and that's good. Well, the people that are willing to talk to them will always be, for all positions, people that agree with them. And in that instance, only people that you disagree with about how to go about things will be reaching out and talking to them.
Yeah.
So you have, if you say that you will not put your opinion out there or deliver it to a person, you've said, okay, well then I won't inform them of things that I think that they should accept as true. And one of the best ways to get someone to consider your position is to facilitate a dialogue where you're willing to hear what they think as well.
But so Jamie, what do you think though when we have like national debates about climate change? Like, and we put that on like CNN or something, because
I think what is necessary is also to cultivate and understand, because at that point you're talking about how American society has adopted a level of anti-intellectualism that is dangerous.
That's true. But but if we're putting that I think you would agree with me that not all ideas are on the public square though.
No,
right?
of course not.
Like some we shouldn't even pretend like there's a veneer of a debate on, because it gives the idea that there's something worth discussing. Like your human rights, Jamie, like your ability to live and to love whoever you want. That I don't feel like that's a question that we should be exploring.
That's true.
Right?
One of the things that happens with this is there's a phrase, "Is this up for debate?" Right?
Yeah.
Which is used colloquial to mean, is there doubt about the conclusion? Right? For example, there is not reasonable doubt about the shape of the Earth. And now all of the lines will fill. But there is not. However, that isn't something that's going to tell me, oh, well, you should never, ever, ever speak to a person that believes that the Earth is flat, even if you have to do it in a setting where there's an audience for you, right? I wouldn't necessarily seek that out because I'm not sufficiently informed. The damage from that is minimal, but I would say that you would still want to handle that delicately, even though it's not damaging. When it comes to things that are damaging, like what Dan is talking about, that's where you get to, no, for civil discourse, you need a civil society. The reason that free speech is important, and the reason, as stated by people that deliberately got together and founded this country, their motivation was, no, speech that is productive for discourse and opinions is protected. That was their opinion. They did not have if you have an idea, you get to say it approach to free speech. at all. And actually, really quickly, some of them sort of, in the policies they tried to enact, didn't hold up to their ideals. But the idea of, all ideas deserve a platform. A complete giving into the bias towards fairness. Well, you've had your say. Someone that disagrees with you can have their say, is not valid. And so I agree with that. Not everything is up for debate, right? Or should be presented in a way that implies, it's a seesaw with the fulcrum at the center about whether or not we have these ideas. But discussion, for example, about, what is it that white supremacists believe? And addressing those ideas, I think, is very different than going, let's put up a debate stage and assign speaking times to two people.
Okay. Let's see what Stan has to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to your very last point there, Jamie, I think it actually goes back to what that female host was trying to say, is that I think it's like very well known what white supremacist, for instance, believes, right? Like that's not like there's not much room to grow on that. But again, if you frame a debate in that way, you're framing it from the perspective of the oppressor rather than the oppressed. So I'm just arguing for this woman, but I think that's how she would respond to that. And also, I feel like I'm open myself to more dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a good thing. But I think a person who isn't open to that type of dialogue on these type of issues is underestimating the power of both ignorance and cultural inertia, right? So you can see this on two different fronts, right? So in this case, for the Confederate flag and, maybe bigotry in general, and also for religion, though I'm not equating the two, of course. But that the people who have grown up in those environments, right? You have a family that says the Confederate flag is just about heritage, and people are trying to take away from that heritage, and the Confederacy was just about states' rights, nothing else, right? And also for people who grow up in a environment that says, Jesus Christ is, our Lord and Savior, God is real, there's no question about it, right? They can grow up in an environment and in communities that all believe the same thing, right? And at no point do they take a moment to question it, right? A point that came up on the show is that you can, Google these things, right? You have more information than ever before, so you can find out. But people may not do that, right? If I had been on the show, I would have said that, when you're in a situation where everyone is telling you the sky is green, from your mother to your father to your friends to your teachers, right? Some people aren't going to look up and check to see if it's blue, right? People will accept those things, and it takes someone to break into that bubble and let them know, right? Yeah. So I think that would be the best way of handling it. But I don't want to minimize how damaging going through these conversations can be, right? For the people who have been oppressed, right? Yeah. It is emotionally taxing, right? As a Black person, just moving through the world passively, you're hit with plenty of racist tropes, of stereotypes, right? That hits you all the time, and you just have to deal with it. You have to learn to have a tough skin, right? But then to actively seek that out, right? Even if it's for the benefit, the greater good, right? To actively put yourself in that situation, that's a lot. That's a lot for us to ask of people. Yeah. So I don't want to minimize the position that that we shouldn't do that. That the focus should always be on the experiences of the oppressed rather than the oppressors.
Yeah, and to bring it to an experience that I think even more of us could relate to is as atheists. Mm-hmm. We are a minority in a religious sense in the United States, and it's harder for us. I don't talk about it with all of my friends and family. Yeah. I know you don't. So it's that's another conversation where it's we, how much does our experiences matter? Because think about this, right? If you're a Christian too, and I was thinking about this as he was talking, like, you know, it would be in your best interest to make sure that I didn't have a voice as an atheist. Because if you actually believe that I could bring people harm in the sense that I could make them think that God's not real and that they're going to hell, you would want to actively stop me and make sure I don't have a platform.
Yeah, no, I understand why the NAFB has come to the conclusion that LGBTQIA plus community should die, right? And that informs my understanding of their arguments and their thinking. And while it's kind of a bad example, because as we've addressed, there's people that are less likely to be persuaded or change their mind, knowing why people come to the conclusions that they do and addressing them, I think, is important. But I agree with you that ignoring the fact, like, hey, racism is a thing. I was trying to find a way of saying that didn't sound dismissive, because I'm really, really not trying to be dismissive.
No.
Because I just talked about Nazis and the NIFB
and I'm switching the
shit.
By the way, that's not to minimize black issues, because I know you specifically talked about that. Like that's just something that we can relate to in the context of our experience a bit more broadly. Like that's actually like one of the things, Jamie. Like when I first started Truth Wanted was like, do I really want, because like, you know, when I was proposing to do the show and everything, I was like, but I would be the host, and I'm just a straight white guy. Like, do we want to have another straight white guy talk about his experiences on the thing? Because like we want to bring in diversity of different perspectives and stuff too.
There's a value to that.
So
I don't think that you having a show detracts from other shows necessarily.
No.
Although people have a finite amount of time to watch shows.
That's true, yes.
So you
and
can
resources go into...
You can make that argument. But I think it's important to get a diversity of experience and also a certain diversity of viewpoint, right, represented. Obviously, very different in terms of who you give or who you make a show with is a completely different.
The question comes to, right? It's like how much are we willing to invest in that diversity? It comes to the point of like,
to be clear, you're talking about diversity of opinion.
Opinion, not people's, right? But talking about like, you know, I had Ocean here as a guest host one time. And he believes there's a gods. I would love to have more guest hosts that believe that, and so we could have that dialogue. There are some people who would disagree with me and say like that's not a good thing to do.
Yeah,
and would say like, oh, we can't be on the same playing field as these people.
Yeah,
but like
I
honestly
name some of them.
Right, but it's like I honestly like I guess my perspective is I don't feel that way. Like I feel like I would want now, but I do have limits though. Like I wouldn't want to have.
You wouldn't go, all right, Ocean, now for an hour and a half, tell people what you believe. And sit quietly.
Yeah. Also, like we can also explore a coalition of allyship and not necessarily come to the same conclusions about, because we both recognize that we're minorities in a greater religious Christian culture, you know.
Sure.
So
right.
Like, there's that conversation too.
There's that. But I would say, like, it goes sort of without saying, but I'll say it anyway. It's easier to be a white atheist in this country than it is to be black and believe in God, would be an opinion that I hold firmly. If for no other reason than you can fake believing.
Yes.
And it's
that's true too.
You know, I've never asked anyone who's tried to fake being white. Although I guess there are people that I don't know.
I mean, there are people
I don't know what I'm talking about.
There are people who
I
are
do my best not to.
Like biracial people and even people who are white passing will take on mannerisms of white people. So that's faking being white.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I have strong opinion. Well, I guess I have a lot to say about the diversity of opinion and discourse and discussion, but I think I address the broad subject less, and certainly subjects like this less, because I have less to say. I'm less informed and are not a great advocate for.
We got to move on. We got to get on to some other calls here. But Stan, thanks so much for bringing this topic up. I don't know if it was quite the direction you want to explore. Hopefully we answered what you wanted to hear from us.
Yeah. But even though, ironically, we did most of the talking.
I know. And then,
and you were emphasizing that we should.
You're right, though. Dang.
Yeah.
But anyway, Stan, we'll give some more topics and time to this particular because that's something again. I love talking about this kind of stuff in particular because there's a lot of perspectives on it. Next year when we get started in 2020 again. So thanks again, Stan, for calling in.
Dan, it's always great talking with you.
Yeah.
We always have great conversations. And Jamie, I'm apparently just learning that you're a homosexual. I am shocked and chagrined. I'm going to take back all the things I said about you before.
Okay.
But no, great. It was really great talking with you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Stan. I look forward to talking to you again. So more in the future. We are
calling on a week when I'm not here to talk over you for half the...
Yeah, I know, right? It's even in our discussions, we can minimize, like, it's all over the place. It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. But we do have some other calls that we want to get to before the end of the show here. We might go a bit long today. We'll see how it goes. I want to go to next, Adrian in Texas. Hello, Adrian. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, I hear you.
Hey, getting a little bit of feedback in the background, if you don't mind. If you have the show playing in the background, go ahead and mute that, and you should be good. How's it going, Adrian?
What do you want to talk about?
Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Yes. What do you want to talk about?
Okay. Hi. Yes, I've called before and talked about intelligent design, but I've never talked to Jamie before. So
most people don't talk to Jamie. It's a whole thing, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. Just not popular.
Finally, I get to talk to James. Yes, I'll just start off at the beginning. And I believe in a creator God because of the evidence that was left behind, like the DNA and the moon. And
did you call in last week?
And no.
Okay. Sorry, someone else called in last week and wanted to talk about DNA and the Big Bang and how those were
Yes, that was a different call.
That was different. Yeah. Sorry. Is that roughly where you're sort of headed with this? Not to shorten the explanation, but I'm trying to make up for all the time I used on the last one.
Yeah, I know you don't have a lot of time, so I'll just I know there's a lot of things that the experts agree on that look to be designed and they don't know why. So I'll just start off with, I guess, DNA, because there's about 20 different animals that off the top of my head I could think of, and also the position of Jupiter and the ozone layer, and there's countless things. But we'll start off with DNA, I guess, since there's actual atheist scientists that agree that looks designed.
I hate to interrupt you at the beginning, but I just want to establish, because you say look to be designed, that I think what might be a phrase that would be helpful to establish before we start providing the evidence, right? Establish what type of crime you're attempting to find the universe guilty of, being designed, and then establish if it was designed, X, Y, and Z would be true. So there's a hypothetical universe with no life, no planets, no stars, and it is entirely black holes. Would you say that any part of that universe was designed?
Would I say?
Or would you think that a universe that, for example, just had black holes in it would be one that was designed, right? Because you're talking about like DNA, which is specific to life as we know it.
Well, a lifeless universe, essentially.
A lifeless universe.
Yeah.
I would have to myself be a black hole to answer that question, but since I'm here in this reality, we're here together.
Hold on,
so can we talk about this reality?
Well, the concept of design presumably is independent of whether or not that design is conscious.
He's trying to get a reference for the definition that you're using.
What do you mean when you say designed specifically, and what does designed look like in the abstract?
Designed would have, I guess, at least 5 things that make it look designed.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
5 principles.
Is that fair?
Or okay. Wait, do you mean like 5 things? So what? Like, how can I tell whether something looks designed?
Yeah.
Well, it can't have just 1 or 2 things. It would have to have at least 5 things. Like, say, like if you saw you thought you saw a face, and it was just like 2 eyes and a mouth, and you could say that's a face, but it would have to you would have to have more like a chin and a mustache, or like eyebrows, and you know, once you have like about 5 things, then you can pretty much say that that's a face without having to actually talk to that face.
Right.
I understand that that's the definition of something, being able to tell whether something is designed, that you are going with, and I'm not sure where Dan wants to take this call.
But
I'm not. I don't agree with that.
So that face on Mars, just because you talked about faces, is that designed? You know what I'm talking about, right? The big picture that people always spread around the internet, where they're like, "Look at this! It looks like there's a face here on Mars," and then it's got kind of the shadow that makes it look like there's the eyes there. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and that's actually, I think they proved that was not a face. It was just shadows. Yeah. But that's because they only saw the eyes and the mouth, and it wasn't at least 5 things. It was only like 2 or 3 things.
Sure, but so like,
it couldn't really.
Like, I'm wondering here, because I could look at that and I could easily say to myself, if I was not aware of the context of that image, if I just saw a picture with a face on the rocks, I could say, wow, that looks designed to me. But I would also be wrong. But like, I'm trying to suss out, why would I be wrong in that instance? What is making this instance where I'm wrong about this particular thing versus another instance where I might look at something and say, like, yeah, that's designed?
How can you test whether your impression is reliable?
It's the number of things that make it look designed. So
okay.
If you only have eyes and a mouth, then, that's not enough things to make something look like a face. You have to have the actual, you have to have the nose.
I mean, I did. Okay, again, to a human, 2 dots in a line look like a face. Right, every smiley face that's been drawn in the back of someone's yearbook, that's what we do, right? But not every right angle looks like an elbow to a human, and those are not qualities of dots and elbows. Those are qualities of the way that our brain perceives the world. It's like apophenia.
Paraphernalia. Well, it's like but yeah. Talk about the phenomenon where people see faces and stuff.
They see patterns and perceive them where they are not.
I wasn't trying to say paraphernalia.
It's not paraphernalia. Pareidolia.
Pareidolia. Thank you.
Pareidolia is the seeing faces in everyday objects. Yeah. But here's my thing is a person. There are many people born with, among other psychological things, face blindness, and they don't see that face. And so when you're saying there need to be 5 things that look designed, you're talking about a subjective impression of what looks designed.
They can feel the nose, they can feel the eyes, they can.
I don't know. I don't mean literally blind. Like, there's people that do not see the pattern of a face the way that a typical human brain does.
Yeah.
Right. They have a different perspective. And that would affect the method that you're proposing to test facts about reality. Because you're proposing a subjective method for determining what reality is.
Yeah, that's too bad for them. But the rest of us, we can still have a chance to see that. But yeah, those people, there's not very many people like that. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I wouldn't.
So the quality of something looking like a face isn't an objective quality of that thing, right? Because it's an opinion of.
I think this is what Jamie's point is. I think Jamie's point is, if we're, we can set up a criteria for what looks designed and what doesn't look designed, but if it's only going to work on certain kinds of people, like if those definitions are inherently subjective to some degree, it does make it harder to determine whether or not this is a reliable method to know if something is designed or not, whether we know if something is true. Now, that's not to say that we don't use methods that are inherently subjective to determine the truth of things. I have my own metrics on what I like about art and what to me is good art and bad art. That's not going to work for you, Jamie, or going to work for other people.
That's not a truth claim about reality.
Yes. It's not going to tell me, give me some sort of objective standard of something, which is my point here, right? It's like if we're using a subjective criteria to determine other things, for example, whether something or not is designed, then I would be hard pressed to figure out if that would tell us something of whether it's objective that it's designed or not. You know what I'm saying? Like whether that's a truth that we can hold to fastly. Does that make sense, Adrian?
Well, can you use that logic everywhere? Like if something does everything appear the way it's supposed? Is everything the way it appears until proven otherwise?
I would say no.
Everything the way it appears.
Like, so if you're talking about what a person should conclude, right, which is different than what something is. Because, for example, we use, like, we only have one reality. We can't operate differently. We have to deal with it in a hard solipsistic type of question. But the way that you're talking about this, again, leads me, like a previous caller, to think that you're putting more emphasis on rationalism than empiricism, right? Can we agree that there is an objective reality? Or at least that we should behave as though there is one?
I agree, yeah.
Okay, so when you're talking about what something seems like, you can use, like, right, like if someone seems like they're gonna try and, I don't know, steal my sandwich, I'm going to guard it more carefully, and I don't necessarily know that they definitely were Steve at the office, but I'm going to operate that way. I wouldn't say I definitely know it, but I go that. But when it comes about larger things about reality, we test ideas, and that's how we get to whether or not things are...
I'm sorry, Jamie, you have to have logical reasons to believe that, and as evidence, and do you have a logical reason to believe that person is a thief? And how many reasons do you have?
There's things. So the reason that I picked that is it involves subjective impressions of a person, their character, and their behavior, which, particularly for a single incident, this sandwich today, Steve, even though it's labeled, right, and shouldn't be stolen. I didn't have lunch today. It's fine. Is a subjective question. That's why I chose it, because you're operating and attempting to find a way of getting through the world without certainty about a question, right? And so I was trying to poke at that just slightly, although it's taken up way more of this conversation because that's not the gist you're going for.
Can I interject here? So, okay, we can take a movie set and we can put it in the context of watching a movie, and we can make it look like the mountains and the trees and the scenery in that movie looks as real as possible.
Yeah.
We can see that and we can think like, wow, that looks so real. And I could tell you, oh, that's actually computer generated.
Yeah.
And if I took a poll of people who like could look at a scene and say and ask them, do you think this is real? Do you think this is computer generated? I bet I would get a split decision on that, right? So,
and actually, if you don't prompt them with a question, I would say a majority of people, their brain perceives it as something that's real.
Sure, and so whether or not that's designed by a human or or the result of some sort of other force or something, right? Like it's hard to determine on our own, exactly, unless we give great scrutiny. And maybe if you're an expert in film and you understand the techniques that go into making certain pictures, you can kind of have a more educated guess on the topic. But it's going to be hard for most people. So, if we're talking about a criteria where we're trying to do the opposite, where we're saying, we want to see whether something natural was created versus something not, we almost don't have a criteria for that, because, I know when something is artificial because of certain tells that an artificial thing is going to have or not have, that a natural thing is going to have or not have. But if everything is the result of intelligent design, if we're looking at a universe involved in intelligent design, what tells can I look for? Because I've only existed in this universe. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Dan, like the movie thing, I mean, you don't have to feel bad about believing that is reality, because it looks like reality, and to you, it is reality until proven otherwise. And in your example, there is proof that it is not reality. So, if you have proof that there is no God, then I'd like to see it. But, let's go past that.
We wouldn't really say that there is proof that there is no God. That's not really a position that we would hold. Yeah.
But you do feel bad that things look to be designed, or You don't like that feeling. I mean, you don't like the thing look that way.
I don't think it's. I don't personally like or dislike it. I recognize it as
not. I mean, the evidence. Like what I thought an atheist was is they lacked evidence.
Yes,
we would.
Yes. Yeah. That's a pretty good summation. Yeah.
Okay, so that evidence. I mean, the evidence that's all around us and everything. That's not good enough.
Well, it
right?
doesn't see what you would call evidence. That doesn't fit into our criteria of evidence. You know, that's
because I mean, if to us it looks that way, then I mean, we don't have to feel bad that we believe that because it looks that way, and nobody has been.
Let me see what I'm saying though. Like if we're already saying that we can design things in a universe that's already been designed, then we can't tell anything from what's designed and what's not designed, because we would have nothing around us that wouldn't be designed if the universe was designed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Wait, hold on. I didn't get that.
Okay,
so say that one more time.
Yeah, so if we're saying, right, that the universe is designed, then how could we possibly know, like, everything we would see is designed. Everything is designed. So we can't distinguish what's designed from what's not designed if the universe was designed. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, but like I don't believe that dirt is designed. I think that that's just like pieces of rocks that fell off of other pieces of rocks and over time and then eventually became sand or dirt or whatever.
But isn't that part of the design though? Isn't that part of the universe? Like, you see what I'm saying?
No, that's just rocks falling off of other rocks.
But rocks.
Yeah, we say the same thing about the chemical processes and biological processes that have occurred and have been influenced by events through the process of natural selection, resulting in what we have today.
You say the same
That's
thing
rocks
about
falling off rocks. Yeah. So when chemicals interact and they interact in a...
I have evidence of rocks.
We have evidence
we have evidence of chemicals interacting in a continuing pattern.
Yeah,
yes,
DNA goes on by itself. It keeps replicating and doing its thing. We don't have to prove that necessarily. Like that's observable.
That's what I'm calling about. See, I would like the evidence that y'all have that makes y'all so confident that there is no God, right? Y'all or where would y'all put y'all's confidence at?
Chemicals reacting don't require an agent.
Well, first thing, Adrian, if you ask for confidence that there is no God, right? You want that specifically.
Yeah, like a scale 1 to 100.
So which God are we talking about, first of all? That's the first question any atheist is going to ask.
Creator God. Like
so just a general creator God.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I am like, you know, a general creator God is different from, like, say, the God of Christianity. I don't think the God of Christianity really realistically would exist in any form. It doesn't make sense that, you know, for his specific attributes.
Hold on. Really quick backstory. Presumably you don't mean just a creator. Presumably you mean a designer God, right? That
a designer.
Designed this specifically to be this way.
That's a good... I was like, why are you making this distinction? I see why you're making that distinction.
Yeah.
So, a designer God... less so than a creator God, because, you know, it's one thing to create everything we see. It's another thing to design everything that we see, because you can create the materials and then the things can just kind of go on its own. Whereas when I'm understanding your definition of designer is meticulously orchestrating the things that are happening in its creation. Like that's kind of what you mean. Yeah.
Or providing the order of them.
So a designer God less so, because everything that there's a lot that we still don't know about how things work, how things came to be, but we have found a lot.
Less than 50 or over.
So okay,
much less.
So you want a specific number? I would say, designer God, less than, I don't know. It's like, if it's a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being 100% confidence, 1 being, pretty much nothing. I would say probably, I don't know, 1, right?
Yeah, it's pretty low for this particular.
And you, Jamie?
About the same, I would say. The example I would give is right now in the back of this building, there's leaves on the ground. If I walk out and I see I see leaves strewn across the ground, how can I tell whether or not they were deliberately placed there? By another human. Because it's something that I might do, because I do all kinds of crazy, weird shit that doesn't make sense to other people until I go, it was about a call. So that's probably something I'm going to do after this. But if I go into the back and I arrange 7 leaves, and I put them in a place that I think is aesthetically pleasing to my eye, and then I drive away, and then later Dan leaves, how would he be able to tell, oh, the way those leaves are strewn was definitely done by a thinking agent who designed that pattern?
Well, it would have to be more than one pattern, right? Or
maybe, but like, what if somebody didn't put it in a pattern at all?
Yeah.
What if I just randomly strewn the leaves around? How could you tell that I did that?
Then, there would be no logical reasons for us to believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could just be the wind.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to get at is that we do have logical reasons to believe in a designer guy because there's so many things that look to be designed.
What about the things?
There hasn't been anybody.
I'm assuming by design you mean like has a purpose, or maybe you mean because what do you mean has a design? Like,
what does design look like?
Like constructed in a way that normally would not appear naturally. Maybe that's probably what you mean, right?
Is that what you mean by design?
Like natural forces would not be able to create such complex beings, right? Like
life. I guess what the experts are saying, what the goal is for life is to go out into the cosmos eventually. Get intelligent and then go out into the cosmos. So that's what the experts are saying is the goal.
I'm unaware of the specific quotes from experts that you're talking about, but I don't think that reflects what the scientific community generally, when they publish peer-reviewed papers and try and replicate them, is discussing.
Yeah,
because what you're talking about is a purpose imbued upon life, and I don't see one.
Yeah, there's a purpose to get intelligent and then go out and venture out into the cosmos, and that's where we're at right now.
That's what we're doing, and we want to do that. But I think that there's a difference between that and purpose.
Yeah, and they have even ones that are higher than that go out and are able to travel to other galaxies, and ones that are even higher than that. That we're just like on the very cusp of we're like babies or whatever. But there's what the experts are saying, like, compared to what civilizations
may or may not be out there. Yeah.
Yeah, with the thing with complexity is, it becomes arbitrary at a certain point. I think that's our main criticism, is because I have this conversation with Christians, which is like, okay, what about viruses? What about bacteria? What about things that don't necessarily aren't beneficial? And I'll get the most common response I get is, well, that's because that's a result of sin, so that doesn't count apparently, even though these complex things. So
you got to take people's arguments as they come. So I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't say that. But
so, do you think that the universe was created with a purpose? Sorry, I totally.
Let me go ahead and finish here, because if we're talking about complex beings, right? Again, I have to stress, it becomes arbitrary to a certain point. Not to say that I can't look at DNA, not to say that I can't look at all of these things and have wonderment and say, wow, it's amazing how all this stuff comes together. It's just that it seems to be we are continually finding natural explanations for the things that we see that don't necessarily require a designer to have started it all. I'm not convinced that the DNA molecule or RNA molecule or any other kind of molecule that you can find in the human body has to be the result of a mover. I don't see why that has to be the reason. It seems that a naturalist explanation is sufficient and also, has a larger explanatory power than a designer god, because there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that come up with a designer god that don't make sense. Go ahead, Adrian, and then I want to wrap it up so we can get to the last callers here.
You mean like lightning and volcanoes and stuff, right? Like how they used to think that was God,
absolutely,
and stuff like that.
Well, people definitely used to think that was attributed to God. Yeah.
Yeah. What I would argue is that is an example of how humans are able to correct themselves once they get the amount of information they need to be able to make that change. And we're all smart enough to do that. It's just we haven't gotten that enough information.
Let me ask you this, Adrian.
We do have enough information to say that things are designed.
If we're able to say confidently that lightning bolts and volcanoes are not the result of design, why can't we go a step further and say that humans aren't? What's stopping us?
We haven't gotten that. Nobody's been able to prove that yet.
Well, I think that's where we might disagree. I think that's where we might. I would say, like,
people been able to prove that about lightning?
Well, I mean, like,
yes, they've been able to.
How?
Being able to say that that's not God. I mean, it's just something else, like nature.
Yeah. The same has been said about human beings and evolution.
Yeah.
The development of biological life as we know it.
Yeah, if I'm saying that, those lightning bolts are the direct result of God, and you would say, no, we have natural explanations for it, right? Like, you don't have to say it's a God. That's what I'm saying about people. That's what I'm saying about DNA. I think we can say the same thing.
Yeah, you can say that, but I mean, it helps to have evidence to be able to back that up, and at least I have the evidence to back up my claims.
Well, I would say that you have as much evidence as the people who believe that the lightning and the volcanoes have designed. You know,
yes.
like it's in the same realm.
And that was the truth. That was the truth. Believe it or not, that was the truth before they got the evidence that
it wasn't.
Proved otherwise.
No, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't. So perhaps you're using the word truth differently than I would. It was not real. That was not an accurate description of reality.
Yeah, the truth can change, but you have to have evidence to change the truth.
When you say no.
When you say about the common understandings of reality,
when you say truth, you mean a common understanding of reality.
Yeah, I think that's his idea.
Right.
Of what it
Okay,
is. Yeah.
so to be clear, even when people believed that lightning bolts were created by God, we know now that that's not the case. Yes.
We know now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, sorry. I just thought you were talking about like a subjective reality change.
Yeah. Anyway, we have to go because we're going way too long with the shows tonight. But Adrian, thanks again for calling.
Guys,
we can definitely
blast.
Thank you so much. We can talk about it more about the evidences and the qualities of those evidences in 2020. And we'll go ahead and just leave it here tonight. Again, thanks again for calling. Really do appreciate it. We are running long, folks. I want to try to get to the last 2 calls here before you go, so please don't hang up just yet. And then we'll see if we have enough time for the Discord. It might be pretty short because we are getting a little bit long here tonight, but that is okay. It is the last show of the year. So, want to get to talk to you guys before we...
I like talking. I'll jump in the Discord for a long time.
Yeah,
even after.
Well,
he leaves.
it's the crew in the back, Jamie. We gotta make sure that they got families and people they want to talk to.
Discord this way, yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna go next to Lynn in Michigan. Lynn, you've been waiting for a bit. Thanks for the wait. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Hi. How are you?
Doing all right. I saw a note here that you wanted to talk about what it was like being an atheist in the 50s and 60s.
Yes. My birthday is January 3rd. Your next show.
Woohoo!
I will be 71.
All right.
Congratulations.
So
you're like 3 times as old as I am.
What?
You're like 3 times as old as I am. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. I've been an atheist since my at least teens. I didn't really call myself an atheist. I didn't know the word until I was 17 or so. But I quit going to church at like 14.
And what year was that, or what time period?
Okay, 14. That would have been like 1964.
Okay, so that's a hard time to be an atheist. I think most people would agree.
Yeah. It's a hard time to be.
When I told my parents, I have to back up a little bit. My father, although I never had a direct conversation with him about it that I can recall, I believe he was an atheist, or at least he would have said agnostic.
Okay.
My mother was Lutheran, but she didn't go to church. She had kind of an agoraphobia thing, and she did not like to go out anywhere or in public.
Okay.
But she wanted all of her children, there were 5 of us, to go to church. And it was a Lutheran church. And church it was kind of different at that time. Religion was pretty much taken for granted, not talked about much. I mean, it was just in the culture. You were religious.
Yeah.
Or, of some variety.
So yeah, I guess it seems like there was people who were just secular maybe, or just religion didn't play as big of a role, but that's also a step different, I would say, from calling yourself an atheist.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, too, at least the church that we went to, it wasn't the kind of all-encompassing go to church Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, choir on Thursday and Tuesday, that kind of church.
Okay.
It was, you went on Sunday to Sunday school until you finished confirmation, which would have been about 14, and then you just went to church on Sunday.
Wow.
We didn't even go to actual adult church until I was in confirmation class.
So when you figured out you were an atheist, did you tell people? Did you keep that to yourself? What were people's reactions?
Well, when I figured it out in my late teens, I told a couple of friends, and they seemed sort of curious but okay with it. I told my parents. I can remember vividly the day I told both of my parents together. And I don't know what the beginning of the conversation was, but I told them that I was an atheist. My mother's reaction was, and I hadn't been going to church for like 4 years at that point. She was kind of tearfully said, "But you were such a religious child."
Yeah, like that's.
I don't remember myself being religious, actually.
Huh? Isn't
and
that
my
interesting?
father said,
"Isn't that interesting?" They'd say that's a good thing. Right, like you want to be religious. That's like a value you should have, right? Because just pointing that out.
Sort of. I didn't hear what you said before. You kind of faded out there.
I was just saying, isn't that interesting that she kind of is associating the idea of being religious with being good, or like being a good person. At least that's kind of what it sounds like she's saying.
Well, I'm not even sure about that.
Okay.
She just thought I was religious, I think, because I liked some of the church music and I would read. I was always reading. I never read the Bible at that point, but I was always reading kind of everything, including religious stuff and non-religious stuff.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
Are you still hearing me?
Yeah.
We're hearing you just fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, my father said, "Be careful who you tell."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
That's probably good advice.
That was true back then, and that's still true today.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. But also the other thing about my father was, and I think this was a lot of influence from him, he was an electronics engineer at a time when that was like the cutting edge of technology.
Yeah.
TVs and radios. So he was very science-oriented. He was always talking about science stuff and logic. He was very big on thinking logically.
Mm-hmm.
And like he would do things like explain how the TV worked, how the radio worked, how to put together a electrical circuit, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And at one point, what I used to do, because our local library was across the street from our church, and when we had our confirmation classes on Saturday mornings, probably half the time I would skip out of confirmation class and go to the library.
Isn't that fun? Oh, man.
That was like my second home.
You wanted to read more than one book.
The big sources of information then were school, church, parents, and if you were a big reader like I was, the library.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Yeah.
Or maybe a bookstore, but I don't even remember going to a bookstore until I was a teenager.
Yeah. Huh. And I imagine, unless you're reading like Bertrand Russell, there's not going to be a lot of books specifically about like atheism or.
Well, there weren't. But what there was a lot of science fiction.
Yeah.
And my father was big on science fiction, so I was introduced to that early.
Yeah, and there's a trend of science fiction writers just either not being religious or if they are religious, it's a very mild kind.
Exactly, and there were a lot of kind of questioning things that were questioning, and especially Isaac Asimov, I remember being one of my big favorites, and he was an open atheist.
Yes, and I think he's one of those writers, and I think other writers probably of his time would do this. It seems like they would almost code their books for other non-believers almost. They're putting out the message out there to make it more palatable for people without necessarily speaking on their own behalf on their non-belief.
Yeah,
right.
I agree with that.
And I kind of burned through all the science fiction books in the library. Starting in junior high, that was like my big focus, and also a lot of nonfiction stuff. But I also remember one time that when I started reading the more adult science fiction, when I graduated from the young adult stuff, I wanted to take out Brave New World.
Yes.
Which, in fact, my father recommended. And the librarian didn't want to let me take it out. It was, I don't know if she thought it was too sexy or too advanced or what.
It's a little scandalous, I'd say even for today that you could look at that and be like, oh, okay. Especially if you know exactly. They use vocabulary in there to hide kind of what they're talking about. I'm talking specifically there's like orgies and stuff in that book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I kind of knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And blatant and almost universal drug use.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that too. But anyway, she wouldn't let me take it out. She wouldn't check it out. She said, you got to get permission from your parents. So
wow.
I called my father. I think I was 16 then. So I talked to my father, and he wrote a note to the library with a 5-word note. Let her read anything she wants. 6 words.
There you go. Man, that's funny that there was even then that one snippet of just outside of the cultural acceptance that you could have access to, in this one building, in this library. They're still kind of holding it off for you and saying, no, the ideas in here are not something you can look at.
Yeah.
Now we live in the internet age where you can just look up anything you want as long as you're not on a public school connection or something. Yeah. You got your own Wi-Fi.
Exactly, or let your parents have put some kind of restriction on it.
Right. Well, Lynn, I gotta say, props to you. I've said this before on this show. Any atheist that was an atheist before the internet, I can't even imagine. I just don't know. I have no context to that experience, and I imagine that would just be really, really hard. Yeah.
Well. I mean, I went through, although I became an atheist in my teens, I also kind of explored a lot of other things. Never any real religion, but kind of new agey, astrology, hypnosis. I was lucky I never got drawn into Scientology.
I think a lot of open-minded people look into that, and some of them land in those areas, and the rest of us just kind of pass over it and just get to where we are. At least that's kind of my experience. Because I was definitely looking into Hinduism and a lot of other beliefs. Just to say,
I went for a time when I kind of believed in past lives, that sort of thing. I actually took in my 20s or 30s, I'm not exactly sure, a class. It was like a past lives hypnosis class where I had an experience that for some time I thought was maybe a real memory of a past life. I now think it was an imagination. Something like your first caller with her imaginary friend kind of thing.
Past life regression hypnosis. Again, hypnosis in general is not something we've covered, but the past life stuff especially is something that's really interesting. And just to know how fraudulent a lot of these people who were pushing that kind of stuff really were, and how much of a racket it is, and how much it's still a racket for people to get into that. But anyway.
But it was a pretty strong prompt for my imagination.
Yeah. Yeah.
I came up with a pretty solid story on one of them.
And that's how people justify their stuff. They come up with their stories on these experiences that they have in the moment of those, past life regression therapy stuff. But anyway, I just want to say, Lynn, we are kind of running long here, so I am going to have to cut the call short here. Pretty short, unfortunately.
I just wanted to just kind of give maybe encouragement in a sense to people who are contemplating a mixed atheist religious person marriage. As long as you talk about it ahead of time and come to some agreements. Like my parents agreed that none of their children would be baptized until we were old enough to decide for ourselves, which is not the usual Lutheran thing.
No, it's not. Isn't that funny? Yeah. I definitely, with the Lutherans, I know. That's true. But thank you so much, Lynn, for that encouragement. I'm glad to know that it's worked out for you. At least it sounds like it's worked out for you.
Well, out of 5 kids, 3 became either atheist or non-religious, and 2 became really religious.
Oh, there you go. So it has to go one way or the other, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's
insufficient
funny.
sample size.
No, thanks so much for telling those stories because, like, it's almost like people just like to pretend like you don't exist. Like, oh, there weren't any non-religious people at this time. Like, atheism is this new thing.
Yeah.
It's a new atheism movement, you know? But it's like, there's always been secular people and non-religious people. They just haven't always had the voice.
New atheist means I don't.
Yep. I'm an old grandma age atheist.
There you go. So it works out. Lynn.
But not a grandma because I'm an antinatalist.
There we go. See, antinatalism always finds a way on this program. I don't know what it is. That just happens.
A hilarious, I believe, accident joke on your part because so many people say life finds a way to mean like when is pregnant, born, etc. But antinatalism is evidently what finds a way.
On this program, right? Like every episode, it comes up for better or worse. But Lynn, I am going to let you.
Antinatalism finds a way.
All right, it totally does. Lynn, thanks so much for calling, and I'd love to hear some more stories from you in the future. Until then, appreciate you. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. Guys, I know we're running really long tonight, but I got one more call here, and this is from Miguel calling from Uruguay. I don't think I've had a call from Uruguay before, so I gotta know.
Until today.
I gotta know what Uruguay is all about, or at least what our caller from Uruguay has to say. Miguel, you're on the air, Truth Wanted. What's up? Can you hear us? How's it going?
Dan, Jamie, thank you for taking my call, man.
Yes.
Hey.
I wanted to know what you thought about or how you handle cognitive dissonance. And what I'm talking about is, you must know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Things like serious issues like abortion, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, where, for example, it's like, let's say, like Catholicism, cults versus, like a child's, upbringing, all that.
I'll give.
How do you handle
it? Yeah. Let me give a brief, explanation for cognitive dissonance, what it is, and then I'll let Jamie give his thoughts, and then I'll do my thoughts. Yeah. So cognitive dissonance is kind of this phenomenon that happens when you have two beliefs that seem to be diametrically opposed to each other. So, for example, you can be a Catholic and you can be for abortion, right? And so you might have some cognitive dissonance. The suffering from that is, okay, but how do you reconcile these two beliefs together? People have done it in different ways. There's a lot of syncretic religious ideas that have resulted because of this cognitive dissonance in the context of religion. There's other kinds of beliefs that where the cognitive dissonance might not be there because they haven't thought about how these two things are opposed. For example, I used to think that, I believed in evolution, always as a kid. That was never something that I really struggled with. But I also believed that God created Adam and Eve. Now, how do I justify a belief that, two people were suddenly created by God with the idea of evolution saying that, we actually came from apes and, we are apes, right? But like other, a history of that comes with the belief of evolution. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. And then when I realized that these were two things that couldn't come together, I had cognitive dissonance on that idea, right? So that's what cognitive dissonance is. Jamie, how have you handled your cognitive dissonance?
Okay, yeah, so it's interesting because I was going to say I've got sort of 2 things to say, which is how do I handle it in myself, and then because I engage in these conversations on shows and off, how do I handle it in others? So with myself, as vigorously and relentlessly as possible, I attempt to seek out and destroy these conflicts in my mind by going, oh, okay, well, I believe A and 1, and they can't both be the first symbol that I think of. So either one of them is or neither of them are. So I have to re-examine my beliefs. And I do that as vigorously and relentlessly and repeatedly as possible, engaging as best I can in scientific skepticism and recognizing the biases that I have. Basically, as much as one can engage in the intellectually humble activity of systematically doubting and questioning one's own beliefs, I think the better off we'll be. And that's how I sort of handle my own cognitive dissonance. With other people, it's as gently as possible, if at all, and only in the right context, because that's could seem very intrusive and rude otherwise.
Well, that's interesting you point that out, because sometimes I think inducing cognitive dissonance can be useful.
Oh, you mean when you draw attention to it?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I do that as well, right? At any point in time I can. Not as much as some people that I've talked to want to. So, for example, there's a couple that lives in an incredibly religious town, and they own a small business. And so they, by nature of needing to make money, can't tell anyone that they don't believe. And so they also live in a state in the United States that's been hit by hurricanes repeatedly. So there was a person, it's in the southeast United States. There was a person going, well, it's good that God put, the Caribbean islands in between us and the hurricane, because that slowed it down before it hit us. Mm-hmm. And that was something they brought up specifically to me, because they didn't challenge that person at that time, but they went, so what you're saying is that a loving God put these people here on this land so that they could suffer more, so you could suffer slightly less from a hurricane he created.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Yeah, it's an easy one, but it's also the way that this person said it, they're constantly surrounded by this, so they were a lot angrier and more reactive and had more invective in their vocabulary and voice than I tend to use.
I'm talking about more like, for example, something more pertinent. For example, freedom of speech, okay? Versus, like with Gab, for example, they say they're freedom of speech or whatever, versus, all the criticism they're receiving that it's, they're not allowing porn or whatever, and that's freedom of speech, and everybody's criticizing them for that. Or something grander, for example, that's like, I'm sorry, I took notes. For example, something like, I don't agree with this, something like the death penalty. Some people are for that, and the people who are against, they say something like, 8% of the time we get the wrong person, whatever.
Yeah.
So what do you think of something like that, more pertinent?
So, what it boils down to is when people look at these different issues, they're using different systems of reasoning. You could call them ideologies, but really they're different philosophies on some level. So Jamie brought up the point earlier of a rationalist take on something versus an empiricist take on something. And in truth, I think most people, the reason why that cognitive dissonance occurs is because I use both rationalist and empiricist thinking for explanations for things, for talking about issues. And so we experience that cognitive dissonance when the conclusion from one of these systems doesn't match the conclusion of another one of these systems. So to kind of bring it together, you have to look at these systems closely and think about what is bringing me closer to this idea of truth, or what even we mean by truth, and what systems are we using to identify our definitions of truth. So that can bring you down a huge rabbit hole, which is why these issues are as big as they are, because they require a huge amount of education, oftentimes, of understanding of complex and nuanced topics that the average person may or may not be completely educated in. I'm barely educated in this stuff myself. And I have a bachelor's degree, right? There are some people with PhDs in philosophy who look at this stuff and they won't have the answers to a lot of these big questions. So really what it comes down to is think about the systems you're using to determine truth and label that. That's the first start. And then, compare and contrast. What system is giving you one answer, and why is this other system giving you other answer? Are these systems reliable? Are these systems, good in other situations? Would you use this reasoning for other situations? This is how philosophy begins.
It's hard, buddies. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Absolutely, Miguel. And thanks for calling all the way from Uruguay.
All right, buddies. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a great...
Keep in touch.
I guess it's night over there. I don't know. Time zones it would only be...
Yeah.
It might be in the same time zone, actually. I don't know.
Oh, God. I don't know time zones anywhere else.
South America? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think the UK is...
We're on top of the UK. Talk about Uruguay.
No, I know. I was going to say the one time zone that I...
Oh, that you keep track of?
That I could know, and then I wasn't sure.
I know, I keep track of all the American ones and relative to us, but that's pretty much it.
Daylight savings time should stop it.
Anyway, folks, I want to give a huge thanks to Jamie, my co-host for tonight.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, of course, brother. Where can people check you out at if they want to find you?
Well, oh boy. So obviously there's the ACA shows that I've been on, which are the various been on or worked on as a producer that I've held up during the show. And here's, The Nonprofits is a show that we produce. Talk Heathen is a show we produce. And Googling from where you're watching now will be easier to find it. The ones that are harder to find are the ones that are actually mine. Any information you need, I'll be tweeting up a storm at Jamie the Atheist. My Twitch, which people have been asking for, is basically Jamie the Atheist. On Instagram, I'm sorry, did I just say Jamie the Atheist? Jamie the Heathen. On all of it. It's all Jamie the Heathen. At Jamie the Heathen on Twitter, at Jamie the Heathen on Instagram, at Jamie the Heathen on Twitch. I'm forgetting one. I don't have a Reddit for myself. I don't have a Discord for myself. I'm forgetting something. Oh, and then Jamie the Heathen on YouTube as well.
Now that you're talking about it, I think a Truth Wanted subreddit would be pretty cool. I would love to see what people contribute to that forum. But if you're interested in creating a fan-made Truth Wanted page, hit us up.
Yeah, Dan would love to show up. I'd love to
I don't want to
show
put
up
any
and
actual
type.
work into putting it, but I would love to show up and just be a personality.
I was gonna say, where does that mentality come from?
I would be remiss. I'm thinking of using that word correctly. If remiss.
Remiss.
Yeah, I'm using words right. I know words. If I neglected to mention the wonderful crew in the back that helps make this show happen every week, if we could just switch to the crew cam. There they are.
Must be the money.
Those are wonderful folks there in the back. Those of you who are watching on YouTube can see the awesome crew that helps make this show and other ACA productions a thing, which this is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin. So if you go to patreon.com/truthwanted, you're helping the Atheist Community of Austin. That goes to help make shows like this one better. Again, this show is produced by volunteers who donate their time on Friday nights, including myself, to make this thing happen. So if you want to donate to that and give to a good cause, that Patreon is, again, patreon.com/truthwanted. You should check it out, as well as, like us on YouTube and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. I like to post on there. And there's an email address where you can contact us as well. It's truth@atheist-community.org. And we have a Facebook page for Truth Wanted as well. And we are also on Twitch, actually. I think we still are on Twitch. I haven't looked at that stream a little bit, but we're there for those of you who want it. So any last words before we wrap up the last show of 2019?
Fergal, Burgle, Manergal, Burgle.
Any real words?
Hey, that is a substitute for God or controlling force. It's been coined by ACA person.
That's not how words work, Jamie.
Okay, I'm sorry. That is literally exactly how words work.
It's not.
Are you sure you're using words correctly? Thank you for watching, and to the people that have said, we miss you on shows and stuff. Thank you for saying that. It's great.
Yeah.
And also, don't beat up on the crew that I'm not around as much. We got some real mad emails about that. And then Dan is great. Don't let this be the only episode of Truth Wanted you watch. Like, subscribe, ring that bell.
Yeah, and check us out. We're going to pop into Discord for just a few minutes because we are running late. But I don't want to do it just because, again, last show of the year. Come check us out again. January 3rd is our tentative date to come back. Give us some time to rest and relax and celebrate the holidays. Well, as always, I'm Objectively Dan. And remember to keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you next year.
Hey, I'm a normal white guy. Demons are everywhere. Demons are everywhere.
I hate you because you're an American.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.